I have now played Noli and Forsaken's open beta for the first time for about an hour and a half. This video goes over my initial thoughts, where I think Noli will end up in this game, my main issues and positives about this killer, and then a quick review of the two new maps. Also, I really need to mention how this is potentially a pre-nerfed version of Noli without the hitboxes being fixed. I highly encourage you to skip to the timestamps above under this video if you want to hear about a specific part of the update. Lastly, I would love to hear your thoughts on Noli, whether you played the beta or not, in the comments. Enjoy the video. If you already know how Noli works, please skip this section. This first section is about Noli's overall playstyle and strategy. Obviously, I've only given half a dozen goes so far, so this is everything I've gathered. Noli is a decently fast killer designed to be anti-loop and extremely tactical. There were several hidden mechanics that we figured out while moving along, but I'll go over each ability specifically. This stab ability is his M1, dealing surprisingly the least amount of damage of any killer's main swing of 25. The main catch is how gigantic the hitbox notably was, way larger than any of the other killers. The swing has a 0.4 second windup, surprisingly easy to react to for someone like Guest. But either way, this ability is stupidly good and was by far more effective than most killer M1s and had me relying on other abilities way less. Void Rush is Noli's staple ability. To put it simply, it's a controllable walk speed override. To put it into detail, it's a lot more complicated than that. From first looks, it isn't nearly as bad as some people like me thought it would be when it comes to being able to control it. Having to hold Q during the action was admittedly a bit awkward and made it harder to put full focus into your movement, but this is definitely something you get used to. And the turning is a lot less controllable than I expected, which is a really good aspect. You still need to be in an open area with lots of space to move around to be effective with this ability. When hitting a survivor, it deals 10 damage but immediately recharges Void Rush, allowing you to bounce either back at the same survivor or jump onto the same one. When hitting a survivor, it deals 10 damage but immediately recharges Void Rush, allowing you to bounce either back at the same survivor or jump onto a different one. Hitting a survivor will inflict the Hallucination effect onto them. I'll go into this effect later, but for now, just know that it's a debuff that they will gain. If a survivor has this debuff, getting dashed into will crash them down to the ground and deal 30 damage, meaning the most damage you can do to a single survivor using Void Rush is 40. But because of what I said earlier, regaining your Void Rush upon impact means you could bounce between survivors dealing 10 more damage each time, allowing you to do stuff like this. The most effective strategy is to switch between survivors, inflict them all with Hallucination, and then finish it off with somebody who already has it for the extra damage. Keep in mind, you know somebody has Hallucination if they are detectable through walls. Guest is notably a good counter to this ability, but you can cancel it by letting go of Q. Nova is the third ability, essentially acting like a corrupt nature. This ability throws a projectile in a straight line, which explodes on impact with a giant hitbox. The issue is how you land this projectile. It cannot be exploded upon floors, so you need to either hit a survivor for the 15 damage or throw it at a wall that they happen to be near. It is very worth noting that you can self-detonate this projectile, but it will have a much smaller hitbox, but honestly, it's a lot more worth it. The last ability is Observant, his quote-unquote tracking ability, but this one is a bit more gimmicky. It highlights all generators on the map, including the fake ones, but I'll get to that later, and allows you to teleport to any of them. A warning on the generator is given to all survivors, and the one he actually teleports to is made very obvious. Once teleporting, all players will then be afflicted with Hallucination, making them all now visible. It's an interesting way to do it, but I'll talk about my thoughts on it later. Also, Observant can be completely cancelled from a stun just by completely pausing you in place. That is a very strange decision in my opinion. Section 2 here goes over the entirety of the Hallucination debuff. I will start to provide my true thoughts on this character and the debuff after this section. This survivor effect is absolutely insane. Hallucination is a debuff that Noli inflicts onto survivors in various ways, completely mixing up the entire game and making his playstyle absolutely wacky. The effect comes in 3 different levels: Hallucination 1, 2, and 3. Okay, please correct me if these placements are wrong, but I believe Hallucination 1 makes you detectable by the killer, 2 makes you detectable and jump scares you with DY on your screen, and 3 makes you detectable, adds DY, and creates a fake Noli that prowls around to hunt you down. This is absolutely insane. The quote-unquote clone will immediately run toward you with infinite stamina and hunt you down once you look at it, seemingly destroying your health bar. Oh, but that was a fake Noli and a fake health bar, because the status effect is absolutely whack as well. It makes you take fake damage, constantly jump scares you, makes Noli almost invisible, spawns fake dispensers and fake Elliot pizzas, flashes random numbers on the timer and generators completed, and oh my god, the list goes on. It is literally meant to mess with you, making your playstyle against Noli get completely flipped upside down. Noli also has a passive that spawns fake generators, up to 3 I believe, which upon completing them inflicts you with Hallucination 3. Thankfully, fake generators are incredibly obvious for their way longer loadup time and giving no XP or malice upon completion, but just solving a single puzzle will inflict you with Hallucination for your slip up, one more per puzzle completion if you didn't figure it out it was fake already. Now that I have reviewed everything Noli, this is what I love about him, how he plays out, and why he is such a cool killer. Aside from the render and design being absolutely horrifically cool, arguably the best killer animations we've seen, and then the obvious. Oh my god, Noli is so fun to play. This definitely feels like the devs combined what they knew made a killer fun and what made a killer boring, took all this knowledge, and created what will absolutely be the most played character in Forsaken for what I see as an extremely long time, way after the hype dies down. Jumping side to side with Void Rush is incredibly fun, and every move of Noli's feels completely fair, and I always felt like it was my fault for missing. I was only able to win once with this absolute beast, but it did take me a long time to learn his hidden mechanics, but I could shake that off. His M1 ability was genuinely unfairly good though, and it made my primary source of damage, way more often than other abilities. I only ever used Absorbent a couple of times as I never killed enough survivors where there were so few I needed a tracking ability, but goddamn dude, Void Rush is so fun and specific. Despite how horribly bad I was at it, this ability just does everything right, and the devs were absolutely trying to keep this killer fast paced with the short cooldowns, which in my opinion is the most clever way to design a character. I can only imagine how much I will enjoy this killer when learning these abilities, but that is a pretty good way to transition into the most notable part of the video. These are my concerns with Noli. Notice I was extremely specific on talking about how insanely fun he was to play, because unfortunately my prediction on the Noli criticism community post might end up being somewhat right. How is Noli when you're the survivor? Now, as I just mentioned, I made a community post a few days ago in the criticism of Noli and his quote-unquote gimmicky ability design. This is me shaking off the bias I will for this killer just coming out, as I was always initially hyped. So here's my concern for Noli regarding the game's future. I talk specifically about his extremely crazy abilities and how they're just taking existing abilities but reworking them to be OP and deal less damage. Like how Void Rush is essentially a ramp up damage controllable walk speed override, which yeah, it is. Ramping up the damage is extremely rare. Like this video from one of the developers will never happen in the main game once people learn how to counter him. So in general, the Void Rush will deal a max of 40 damage assuming the killer can hit you twice, and a minimum of a measly 10. It's both harder to deal big damage and does less than walk speed's 45 both ways. Nova does the same damage as Corrupt Nature but doesn't inflict slowness, which basically guarantees Cool Kid some extra hits. The catch of dealing extremely low damage along with the M1 being the least damaging killer swing in the game is obviously the extreme gimmicks like Nova dealing splash damage and Void Rush being controllable. This is not good ability design when it comes to other survivors in my opinion. Taking similar ideas of existing abilities, which is fine, it's their game, and then buffing them but reducing the damage doesn't sit well with me. The devs perfected Noli to play as the killer, but I unfortunately do not think they balanced it out to be a super fun time for the survivors. This is my prediction, by the way. I've obviously had a great time today, but I've shook off the recency bias and really considered what this killer will be like when people get good enough to bounce off survivors through walls, make Nova unavoidable due to self-detonation, and use the hallucination status effect in such an advantage where they confuse you by almost pretending to be the fake Noli. The opportunities are endlessly scary, and by the way, I don't blame the devs for this at all. It is impossible to make a killer balanced or even identify the worst or best killer for how heavily it depends on the player. You could arguably say this for any of the 5 existing killers, and keep in mind, this is all my own prediction. Noli could end up being perfectly fine and the game moves on, but for how I view this playstyle, I'm just a bit concerned. For this last section, there were a few other little changes in this open beta, such as the loading screen and oh my god, is that a Deltarune emote? Anyways, the 2 new maps were added to this beta to be playable early before the update. Work at a Pizza Place and Tempest. I'll go over Work at a Pizza Place first, and oh my god, I love this map. My favorite map at Forsaken is Cool Carnival, and this takes basically everything I love about it and recreates it in a new scene. The detail and map size is spot on, and the amount of open area combined with the genuinely fair amount of elevation makes this map feel balanced. The lighting is pretty, the detail, like I said, is great, and I love the torn down version of the original game look. I genuinely think this might be one of the best maps in the game upon release. Congratulations to the devs for making such a balanced Forsaken map. I'm looking at you, Underground War. Tempest is the other map. I don't like this one nearly as much, but it's still pretty good. I am immediately obsessed with the weather effects and details. They brought back the Poison River, but actually made it fair and balanced, unlike whatever monstrosity is in New York's resting place. But this map honestly feels awkwardly bumpy and just extremely messy on its elevation. I detect some really stupid deaths to collision in the future, along with the map size just being a giant square with one interesting structure. This also feels like a Planet Lost situation, where the map looks kind of identical from all sides except the elevated platform, and that isn't a good thing. The lighting also makes the map feel like it goes on way longer than it should. It's hard to explain, but in terms of gameplay, it still feels balanced, but it's just strangely built in my opinion. But that's it for my rant video. Remember that this is all my initial thoughts on the update, and I totally see my opinion changing on some things I said here. Nonetheless, I am incredibly hyped for the Noli update, and the devs did a spectacular job. So I hope you enjoyed my rants, and you have a great rest of your day.